Coming up on episode 136 of the Behind the Back podcast. This is an action-packed podcast. We have a lot to talk about. The NBA schedule comes out, so we pick some nuggets from the Sacramento Kings schedules that we're looking forward to. What's the fun stretches? What's the bad stretches? Back-to-backs, all the fun stuff. We break that down. And then we pivot on over to Niners camp. Ben talks about the preseason game, what he liked, what he didn't like, and we break down some of the 49ers-Chargers joint practices. And then we go over to Philadelphia, who are now in Foxborough, taking on the New England Patriots, A.J. Brown, Milton Williams, old faces, the new places that they get to take on, and all the news from that first day heading into day two. And then we make our NFC North and our NFC South predictions as the BTB prediction series rages on. With that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan-Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Reds. Ben, my brother, how are you today?
I have been better. I am a little under the weather, but we're here. We're talking football. We're talking basketball. I don't have too many complaints.
Heck yeah, I love to hear it. And yes, hopefully you feel a little bit better. I know you caught a little something, but at least you're here recording. We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about, guys. So we're recording here on Wednesday night, and this will come out on Thursday. So there's going to be some fun action happening on Thursday, but we got to talk about some of the news that's happened over the past week. So as you guys heard in the intro, action-packed pod. If this is your first time checking us out, welcome. We appreciate you checking us out and spending some time with us. Let us know if you agree with our takes. We got a lot of juicy stuff to talk about. So let's start in Sacramento. For the NBA, because the NBA in general, the schedule release came out. A bunch of teams did their cool little video release, and I think it's so weird because like I think the 2020s is when you really started seeing these like schedule release videos come out and stuff. But I really enjoyed some of the ones that got posted, and the Kings did one too that was pretty clever. I enjoyed it. But now the schedule's out, so we thought we'd go with it with you guys. This is going to be more of like a summary because what our takeaways are from the schedule, because we could go game by game, but let's be real. This is a 30-win team, so we're not gonna go through game by game and pick what we got here. So Ben, we're gonna pull up what we got here for the Sacramento Kings' scheduled Nuggets. And is there anything off the rip that catches your attention?
Yeah, dude, January. I mean, there's always a month. There's always 1 month for the Kings that is just a train wreck of a month. And this time around, it's January. When you look at the 5 back-to-backs in the month of January and the teams that you play in those back-to-backs, that is not easy, dude. Like, that is the kind of schedule that can absolutely tear your season apart. Like if the Kings had high aspirations going into this year, let's just play around with theoretics for a second. If we had high aspirations for the season, we were like, all right, the Kings are going to be a playoff contending team. They just need to figure things out from the start. They got to get going early. There's some new guys on the team. Once they figure things out, we'll be fine. Then you look at this January schedule, and you're like, how the hell are we supposed to get through January and be a playoff contending team? So January off the rip is what kind of shocks me.
Yeah, in January, it's a crazy stretch. And obviously we go through the 5 back-to-backs, the 17 games in 30 days, followed by a long road trip that's in there at the very end. Against good teams. I mean, we finished the month of January with the Lakers, Nuggets, Sixers, Wizards, and Pistons. This year. That's a really tough 5-game stretch. But one thing, yes, January is going to be tough. 14 back-to-backs in total. And obviously the Kings aren't going to be, a league pass team with 2 national games going on this year. But one of them will be against the Warriors, so that'll be fun. But when you look at just like the schedule in a whole, November actually starts off pretty light. So we get the brutal January, but it starts off with a much lighter November, because I remember last year we felt like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get through November? Like these teams that we're playing Denver 3 times, OKC a bunch. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but This time around, it feels like November's that home stretch. You guys get it right here. You see the longest homestand here. From November 4th to the 18th, the Kings are here. So that's like a really good stretch for, the Kings fans to really get to know Acuff a little bit more, for Acuff to get comfortable playing at home, for all these guys to kind of figure things out in front of the home fans. So, I don't know how many of those games we expect them to win. They're all against really tough opponents, but at the same time, you get that stretch. You feel good about Acuff kind of assimilating into the league a little bit, knowing that you don't have to play, the top of the league every single game to start the season.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point because, early on, there's going to be a lot of excitement about, Darius Acuff and Emmanuel Sharp and all these new guys and just the youth movement that the Kings, are under right now. This has been a push that the Kings fans have been pushing for years now, right? Mm-hmm. And so to finally see that happening and to have some real excitement building with, the guys that they just drafted, to have this stretch in November where you get all these home games versus having it at the end of the season when you've watched all year long this team just be awful, you know what I mean? Like, I think in November, being able to have a fresh excitement to the season is going to be super fun for Kings fans because they're going to be packing Golden One Center. Like, these games are going to be exciting, even though we probably won't win a lot of them, but nonetheless, like, there's excitement to be had and there's reasons to show up, and it's getting into the holiday season too. There's a lot of fun events that happen in that stretch too. So I like that stretch for the Kings.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a good point because we're going to start the season 5 out of our first 7 games are going to be on the road. So that's going to be, it's going to be tough to ask, the young core to try and go out there and compete right away, with our first game being at the Clippers. And that's going to be a fun matchup on the road now that they finalized the whole Kawhi trade, all that stuff. So, we get to look at, the new look Clippers and how that all works out over there for them. So it's, this year is going to be, it's so much, I've been talking about it all off season. Like the feel around this season it feels totally different than what it was last year. And even the year before that, it's like it feels like we've pushed a reset button. I feel exactly how I felt when we drafted De'Aaron Fox. Like the sense of like, oh, now I get to just watch this kid and see if he's any good and how he progresses and what the team looks like in like 2 or 3 years. We're not playing for this year, frankly, not even next year. It really is going to be a couple year thing while we really start bringing in the pieces that Scott Perry really wants here. So I'm excited, even if, the season doesn't, turn out from a success wise, if we really only win like 25, 30 games, so long as these young guys are showing progression, that's all I'm here for.
Yeah, I think lowering expectations is going to be like the first step for actually enjoying the movement here. But yeah, there's reasons to believe that this season, you can have some bright spots. And I think, you talked about it, man, a little over a month ago now when we initially drafted, Darius and the whole hype around it was going on. You talked about how, like, he's going to have some big games. You might even see a 50 bomb from him. You might see this, that, or the other thing. Like, we could see some really fun, things with this young team this season where it's a stretch of losing, and then all of a sudden you have one of these games that's, it breaks the storm of hell, and you're like, yeah, this is fun. This was a fun atmosphere. It reminds me of, like, an example would be the game the end of last year playing against the Pelicans when Dylan Cardwell got that block on Zion. It was like an awful stretch of games, right? But right at the end, like, make the plays that mattered. You got a big win. Not that you needed it. Probably didn't need it. But you got a big win in a big way, and it was fun. And Kings fans really were vibing off of that, for that week and weekend. So I think you're going to have a few stretches and a few games here and there sprinkled in where this season, as long as your expectations are in the right spot, I think that you're going to find reasons to, believe that this season's kind of fun. So we'll see. That's what I got to say.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, there really isn't much to take away from the schedule as a whole. Every year's the same thing. You play all 32 teams. That's what's fun about the NBA. But I do think this year, the focus for not just Kings fans, I think there's just so much happening around the league with all these guys switching places. This is a really electric offseason with all these moves and changes. And the league's going to be paying attention to everything that's not Sacramento for the entire year. We're going to be an afterthought anyway. So we really get to just go back to Kings mediocrity and hide in the shadows and just enjoy it as Kings fans, and we get to enjoy our own little highlights here. So I think for the schedule, like there's big games on here. There's tough stretches, and we get to see how these young guys grow. I won't be surprised if January's like the rookie wall moment for these guys, where you're going to really test your endurance and have to continuously show up each and every night. So I'm excited to see how they handle that adversity going through this year. So I'm just excited to see all the challenges they get to embrace and see what they can overcome.
Exactly. And in an awful way, only 2 national TV games. I'm fine with that. I'm actually happy with
Seriously. Same. All right. So I think that's good on the Kings talk for now, but we will pick up back on them if we hear any news as we inch closer to the season. So,
well, hold on. You sent me today.
Oh, yes,
you sent me today something really interesting that I want you to bring up.
Oh, yes, good catch. So it was reported the Sacramento Kings, obviously, since Russell Westbrook retired, the Kings are still in the market for a backup point guard or a mentor, per se. There was talks about Victor Oladipo potentially joining the fray. He's had interviews and stuff like that. But there was 2 other names that came up today that the Kings are going to be looking into. And that would be one, Elfrid Payton, and Cameron Payne.
Yep.
So we have those 2 guys, both long-term veterans who have really been the same since they've gotten in the league. Not too much. I know Cam Payne had like a little stretch where he was like kind of going off for a second there. I think it was in Philly. But, both of these guys have moved around teams. And, how would you feel if we got one of these guys as a backup point guard?
So that's the problem is Victor Oladipo, Elfrid Payton, and Cam, like these are guys that they really haven't been big names in the NBA for a number of years. And for that matter, like I'm not against it, but I'm not for it. I don't really care one way or the other.
Right.
In my opinion, it would be cooler to see Victor Oladipo just because like Victor Oladipo has a history in the NBA and he was a special talent, still is a special talent. The only issue was that he couldn't stay healthy at any point really in his career. And with the, derailment because of the injuries, it really set his career in kind of a negative way. But nonetheless, he is a superior talent, and he's been plotted as a great teammate. He's been plotted as a veteran leader at times. So it's like bringing him in and bringing him alongside some of these young guys as kind of a developmental leader, I think would be beneficial. And I think you could say the same for either of those other 2 guys as well. But I think if I had to tier it, I would say Victor Oladipo is probably my number 1 choice, then Cam Payne, and then Elfrid Payton. And the reason I say that is just Elfrid Payton, like he was good, but he was never like one of the main guys at any stretch. Cam Payne had a great run, like you said, and it was in Philly. But on top of that, like all these guys come from years of winning at levels prior to the NBA, so they have experience. It's just it's a matter of pick your poison kind of thing. And for Victor Oladipo, to me, that just seems more exciting. And again, let's see what those roles even look like and if these things even happen in the first place. I don't want any of these 3 guys taking a crazy amount of play time away from any of the young guys. That's my biggest concern.
Right, and then it begs the question, and we had the same exact discussion last year, like, what about Malik Monk and having him serve as the backup point guard? That's what his main role was, is like in the Beam Team 1, when, you could supplant him in just like 5 minutes. It's different than asking him to be just like the point guard, which he didn't thrive in as much when the Kings asked him to do that. But I think even in a limited capacity, the way Malik Monk runs the offense and runs the pick and roll, I think is something that Acuff could truly benefit from. So, like, especially compared to these other options, I'm like, Malik Monk is the most proven. Obviously, Victor has had a longevity of more success, but like at this moment, I think Malik Monk's the best player even out of those 4. So it like begs the question to me, why are we even having this discussion again? Which makes me think, are they really committed to Malik?
Yeah, and I mean, you can also talk about how I don't think that they've officially written off, Nick Clifford as a potential backup point guard option, because they were still kind of playing with that idea during Summer League. So
it's true.
Yeah, the direction of the Kings right now is a little unclear as far as what the backup point guard position is going to be. What is clear is that Russell Westbrook retired. We did our whole send-off last week, and it was fantastic. I had kind of alluded to wanting him back in a veteran role, but not back in a take minutes away from my young guys role. And that's the biggest thing that I'm most concerned about. We need to see the development. And we need to see the development of the guys who are going to be pinnacle players for this organization moving forward. And that, to me, is the most important thing right now.
Agreed, absolutely. So, yeah, we will keep tabs on the Kings. Good catch on bringing that last point up because, yes, that did happen. So, we will now pivot on here to talk about football. So, when we do, there's been a lot of fun football news that's happened throughout the NFL this week with all these practices and preseason kicking off. So let's start with the team of the pod, and that is the San Francisco 49ers, who had a very fun preseason games. Obviously, some ups and some downs, but I think there's a fun performance you're going to bring up here. And but you guys also have a joint practice with the Chargers. So what's going on in San Francisco? How are you feeling coming off of a fun little preseason game?
Yeah, the preseason to me is, we had this conversation yesterday. The preseason to me is, it's interesting. Like, you get an idea for the direction your team is going. You kind of get an idea of how they're looking. You get an idea of the injuries that you've got to deal with. And most importantly, like, you're preparing for the regular season. And a lot of us will also argue that the regular season game, weeks 1 through 4 can be considered preseason for some of these teams, especially title contender teams that really don't look at the preseason as anything. So, in my eyes, like, the joint practices, the preseason games, it's all cool, it's all good and gravy. I'm not taking a ton out of this, but this game against the Titans, the joint practice in and of itself was great. It was fantastic. Loved all the energy that came out of it. I was laughing about it. The game was okay. I didn't think that the game was a ton of fun, but I thought that there was some good, there was some bad to take away from it. I think that, De'Zhaun Stribling looked fantastic. That, to me, was player of the game for the 49ers. I mean, Strib Club, baby. Like, he is looking nice right now. And so I thought he had a really monster game. Grayson Halton had a monster game as well. He was making his presence known on that defensive line. We saw some flashes of Romello Height in there. Curtis Rourke was balling through a quarter and a half before he got injured. And that injury was awful. I mean, he went down with broken ribs. He looked like he was kind of concussed at one point. He ended up going to the locker room, later went to the hospital because he couldn't breathe right. He was, later released, and he's on the road to recovery right now. But, dude, I mean, like, can't dodge a bullet.
I saw the play, too. It was brutal. Like, he gets sandwiched. I was like, dang, that's tough, dude.
It is, man. But, it's football, right? So, there was some good, there was some bad. 49ers backups and third stringers being able to keep up with these Tennessee starters, to me, was the fun part about it.
You guys have a knack for doing that, huh?
We have ways of doing it, for sure. So, not a ton to take out of that game, but the joint practice with the Chargers is what I wanted to get into. So, the 49ers Tuesday had a joint practice with the Los Angeles Chargers, and this was always going to be a more competitive and tougher practice for the 49ers. I'll kick it off by saying there were no fights. Not a single fight this week, not like last week where we saw 8 of them. When asked if the team did anything differently to keep the session civil, Shanny took a fun little jab at Robert Saleh. He was saying, no, their head coach had more discipline than Tennessee's. No, I'm just joking. A few things started early in Tennessee's practice, which when that happens, then everything just gets escalated throughout the rest of the day. I wasn't on both sides, but nothing happened early, and usually when nothing happens early, nothing happens late. So this was a straightforward practice, joint practice with the Chargers. And, before that, we just talked about Shanny. Jim Harbaugh was saying, dude, let me go out here and shake Brock Purdy's hand. I got to check with Kyle, see if I can shake Brock Purdy's hand because he's a great quarterback, and just gassing him up a little bit. And, I mean, if there's a quarterback coach out there, it's Jim Harbaugh. He knows a good quarterback when he sees one. So high praise for Brock Purdy there. So let's talk about this joint practice here for a second, and let's talk about the Niners side of things. So the offense. Purdy looked comfortable for the better part of the day. He threw an interception in the red zone that was a tip drill interception on a pass intended for Luke Farrell. Aside from that, he did relatively well. Again, looked comfortable throughout the day. Kalen Black was back at practice for the first time since his injury and broke off a few big runs. He hauled in a touchdown as well off of an 8-yard red zone attempt. But the offense definitely had its times of sputtering. De'Zhaun Stribling pulled in a couple touchdowns on contested catches. This is just something that I think we should get accustomed to as 49ers fans, because this guy looks like a real deal right now. But I'll save my gassing up for a little bit later. But Purdy, when he was asked about kind of the rough day that the offense put together at times, he said, honestly, I don't think it was our best day. I feel like fundamentals and stuff were just a little off and whatnot. Obviously, there was some stuff we need to work on. But I just feel like we could have come out with a little more of a chip on our shoulder offensively. And that, to me, I love what I heard from Purdy there, because this is a guy who's taking accountability. He takes accountability when he makes mistakes. He takes accountability for when his team doesn't come out and punch first. I love to hear what he had to say after this practice. They didn't come out with a chip on their shoulder. And whether you intend to or not, or whether you need to or not in these preseason joint practices, it's kind of a, make your own decision there. But you don't want to be punked. And I think that the 49ers ultimately in this practice kind of got punked a little bit. But I want to view it as kind of a wake-up call. That, I think it's important to remember that it's preseason, that these practices aren't exactly game scenarios. And that's a good way to kind of transition here to the defensive side of it. The 49ers defense struggled against Herbert in the deep ball. And Fred Warner, he said, anytime you get to go against another team, it's a great opportunity to see where you stand. I always look forward to joint practices for that reason, to come out, to be in a game-like setting against another opponent. Luckily, it was a good test for us. Fred Warner had a great day. His highlight was a forced fumble on David Njoku. He's a beast. He is the voice of the defense, and he was the loudest voice out there. As for other highlights on the day defensively, the only highlight was relatively a low light, and that was Jack Jones, cornerback Jack Jones. He should have had an interception on Herbert, but he ended up not being able to hold on to the ball. Ultimately, I'm going to get into this here in a second, because I think we have some similarities between our joint practices and how things went down. But Herbert diced up our secondary, our 49ers secondary. And, from a pressure standpoint, like Osa Odigizua, he generated consistent pressure on all the quarterbacks for the Chargers. And it's worth noting that the D-line in general generated a good amount of pressures. Several of the Chargers' biggest plays of the day would have been negated by a sack if it was a real game. The secondary is a concern of weakness on the defensive side for the 49ers, but if the 49ers D-line can stay healthy and generate the consistent pressure on quarterbacks this year that we've seen throughout the first couple of practices and the first preseason game, depending on how today's game against the Chargers go, this year they can potentially hide some of these deficiencies that you see from the secondary. But, this whole, it's so funny, man, because you scroll social media and you're watching these videos of Herbert just throwing these dots downfield, right? And just dicing up our safeties and our DBs and CBs are getting burned on every play. And it's like, damn, dude, like, what is going on? What they're not showing you, and what other pages will show you, is that Oso will break through. He'll have a second to hit him, but he'll have to pull off because, you cannot touch a quarterback in a joint practice. Otherwise, you are basically done for the practice. And so he'll pull off. And then, Romello Height will break through, but he's got to pull off. And then 2 seconds later, I shit you not, 2 seconds later, Herbert throws the ball downfield to a wide open receiver. So, he's dotting up his receivers all throughout our defense because he's got all the time in the world to throw. So, in a game scenario, I don't think that we're going to see the secondary get diced up as much. But it really does come down to how much pressure can the 49ers generate on the defensive line this season. And quite honestly, dude, like, I'm nervous about it. And it's not because I don't think we have the personnel and the talent to do it. It's whether these guys can stay healthy. I mean, already we're not looking great. You know, Bosa's dealing with his knee tendonitis. He's progressing, looking like, you know, again, this is more of a normal thing. He's looking like he's going to be able to play and hopefully put some good weeks of football in front of him, but not promising updates from Michael Williams on his return. We'll see if maybe, you know, target like a week 4, maybe later in the season, and we'll get him back. But like, it's not the deepest defensive line. And up until today, I was pretty high on the idea of getting a guy like Vita Vea. And going into this whole conversation, I was ready to say, Marcos, if I'm John Lynch, I'm picking up the phone and I'm doing anything I can to get Vita Vea on the 49ers just for insurance. Because that's another guy who can stay on the field. That's another guy who can generate the pressure and be consistent with it. But he ended up inking his deal with the Buccaneers, and I think ultimately a lot of us saw it coming, but we didn't know for sure, because you never really know for sure when somebody requests a trade and requests to be out, and especially with the Buccaneers and being in kind of the flux state that they're in, you didn't know. But he ended up inking the deal. Now we're ready to go get Max Crosby. But I want to end this by saying, like, I don't think our defensive line, as it sits, can withstand an 18-week season, a 17-game season, and be fully healthy. I mean, just based on the history of the 49ers, it doesn't seem promising to me. And, you know, with guys like Alfred Collins and CJ West, young guys, they've put some promising things on tape. They've put some not so promising things on tape. There's a lot of development to go there still. Having a guy like Osa is going to help him a ton, but it's also like, can you stay on the field? Because Alfred's fighting back. You know, CJ West is fighting back from an injury. There's a lot of question marks around that D-line, but if it is solid, I think our defense in general is going to be solid enough, because I feel confident in the cornerback room and Upton Stout and DeAndre Lenore. I don't know how confident I feel in the safety room. That is definitely where I'm the most concerned. You know, Jair Brown, Malik Mustafa definitely don't put the best film on tape at times, both of which struggle with different things, neither of which excel at the same things. So it's kind of like a pick your poison thing with both of them. And Renardo Green, is as far as, you know, his positioning on in cornerback, it's like, again, puts some promising things on tape at times, but has some boneheaded breakdowns. So it really does boil down to how much time quarterbacks are going to have to throw. And if you see these elite quarterbacks, if you want to call Justin Herbert an elite quarterback, it's your own. I'll leave that up to the listener's discretion here. But if you consider him an elite quarterback, which I personally do, considering the play style of him, if he has time to throw, he will dot you up all day long. And that's, you know, that's something to keep an eye on if things don't go well. But ultimately, 49ers play tonight against the Los Angeles Chargers. Going to be a fun game. Kyle Shanahan confirmed some starters will play. Will Brock Purdy play? Who knows? Do I feel nervous about it? Damn right I feel nervous about it, because it just scares the hell out of me thinking that, you know, any of our starters could potentially go down. So I'm going to be lighting the incense and thinking the positive vibes all day long, and praying to the football gods that we come out unscathed. But I'm excited because it's another week closer to the season.
I agree. I mean, the whole preseason of it all worries me. I mean, we saw starters last weekend, you know, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. I'm like, oh my gosh, if these guys get hit the wrong way in a preseason game, then the whole season's over. Like, I understand that could happen in practice too, but at least you have more control because you're not allowed to hit the quarterback. That stuff scares me. And that's why the Eagles, you know, Robert Saleh taught the Eagles a lesson, because they tried to play that lesson in, you know, 22, and Robert Saleh decked Jalen Hurts basically to let the team just dick on him, and they were like, okay, well, nope, we're never playing Jalen in the preseason again. So the Eagles really are one of those teams that treat it like the first 4 weeks like the preseason. So for the Niners, I hope for your sake that it's not Purdy. If Purdy's out there, he sees a series and then you're done. Like, get him out of there.
Exactly.
I really don't want him in there at all, because he's gonna do Purdy things, and that makes me worried too. Like, is he gonna try and extend a play for 10 yards? I don't know, man.
Yeah, and then we struggle with the turf toe for the rest of the season, right? No, it's a legit concern, and I'm even concerned as far as going with Mac Jones for this game as well.
Right.
You know, past that, you're just looking at Adrian Martinez, and I'm not going to lie to you. He's not a great quarterback. I think he's a good, serviceable quarterback, but he's not going to be anything more than like a third string quarterback, at least on the 49ers. So, for me, it's like, do you go into this game and just say, whatever our offense wants to do, go for it. Just do one, like you said, maybe it's one possession down the field, and you give it to Brock Purdy or Mac Jones. Personally, in this game, I would go Mac Jones. I think you go Mac Jones for the first series, maybe the first quarter, and then you go Adrian Martinez the rest of the game. And for that same series for Mac Jones, you put your Debos out there and such. But I don't think you keep him out there much more than that, because until it's like the last preseason of the game of the season, prior to the season starting, I don't feel comfortable running starters. I don't care what team it is. I just don't feel comfortable with it.
Absolutely. I mean, and you guys already have the weird start to the season going to Australia. Like, you have to be extra careful, those kind of things. Like, who knows what that's going to do to you guys too. So it's interesting. Yep. That part's interesting. But love what I'm hearing so far from Niners camp. So that's all good and well. Stribling with his debut was awesome, very impressive. I was happy to see him perform well. So that's awesome. It's super exciting.
Heck yeah.
All right, so we will pivot on here to the Philadelphia Eagles, and they got to travel up to Foxborough for their reunion with some old friends. Milton Williams, AJ Brown, got to catch up with a lot of the guys. It was a very exciting day of practice. One where that's the other thing. For your joint practice for the Niners, you guys were in LA for your joint practices. For the Eagles, they also traveled and are the road team in this joint practice scenario. I wonder how much of the reporting, obviously we have, both fan bases, both teams have their own individual beat reporters there, but, I wonder if there's a home field advantage to kind of like how things go, right? But Eagles are in Foxborough. It was an electric crowd that was there. It was very cool. The first rep of the day was AJ Brown, Quinyon Mitchell one-on-one. They gave him what they wanted. And AJ ultimately picked up where he left off last year, dropping balls that are right in his hand. That playoff AJ is back. So I feel really good about that. But then he proceeded after that point to absolutely dominate us this practice. It felt like the intention for the New England Patriots was like, we're going to just feed the crap out of AJ and dare them to stop us. And, the Philly defense, they had a really hard time going up against the Patriots, especially in those 11-on-11s. Drake May was dicing them up. They were getting big plays, chunk plays. So it just wasn't a good day for the defense. Although same rules apply, right? Plenty of times where Drake May gets to throw off, but he would have been sacked, or the play would have otherwise. That wouldn't have happened in the real game, and it happened numerous times. They were talking about, the Eagles' defensive line just working the New England Patriots O-line. Will Campbell got, and I quote, tossed around like a rag doll twice by Jalix Hunt on back-to-back reps. So it was like one of those things where, like, the Eagles' defensive line really showed up. That was the dominant group of the day for the Eagles, and they really stood out. Jalix Hunt is really standing out as like a breakout, candidate guy. Really excited for that. Former mock draft pick by Ben Retz over here. So, that was pretty cool. I just think that, the discourse around preseason and the discourse around joint practices is crazy, and it's just we're all sick. We all love football. We miss it so much. We're just gonna absorb every bit of content we can and try to make something of it. And the Eagles didn't get as much fun during the preseason game against Baltimore because they didn't show up. I mean, there was a snooze fest. We got one touchdown from Cole Payton that looked like Jalen Hurts. That was pretty cool, but that was at the very end and it didn't matter. The offense couldn't do much of anything. So then you build off of that, and then you enter this joint practice where the beat reporters of Philadelphia, they treat it like their Super Bowl. Like they're like, Elliot Shore Park's the main, one of the main Eagles reporters on 94 WIP. He's been tracking training camp stats for years, has records on joint practices and stuff. Like this is his thing. Like he takes it that seriously, win-loss record and everything. So he dubbed it as a loss for the Eagles today, but they said it was good moments. Patriots offense really did stand out. Jalen had 3 interceptions today. They were all in 7-on-7, so they're like, but once they got to 11-on-11s, he had a couple really good plays. The rushing offense was really successful against the first team of the New England Patriots. So that was actually a super promising sign. Was how is this new run game going to look? With Saquon going outside on the outside zone plays, the wide zones, all that. How's the offensive line looking? And the O line is really taking to the new system. So if this was a real game, it felt like, Saquon would have had multiple 20-plus yard runs in this kind of game. So it was a good showing by the rushing offense, which then set up Jalen to have a couple big throws, including like a 40-yard bomb to Elijah Moore, who's also been having a good camp because one thing the Eagles have been dealing with, we have had actually some decent injuries this year during camp that we normally don't see. I think we had 16 dudes on the injury report at one point, but the two guys that are important are Mekhi Lemon and Devontae Smith. They're still not back. They're participating in a limited capacity. They're slowly getting better, but Jalen hasn't spent any time with these guys in the past 3 weeks. He hasn't, he's worked with them off, after practice in a minimal capacity, but like the reps, they're not going to them. And it's been a lot of Elijah Moore, Hollywood Brown, Dontavian Wicks, and Dontavian. They've looked good, but the discourse around it's so frustrating. Where all the Patriots fans are like, "Oh, the Eagles could use an AJ Brown." I was like, "No, the Eagles are missing their top two receivers, so like, it's not going to look the same." So that's the good thing is there's been positives on the offense. It seems like the new system, the guys seem to be taking to. So the main takeaway is that these guys just keep improving and keep showing, and maybe put on a better, practice today. Hopefully, by the time this comes out, then the second day we're hearing them, the Eagles had a much better day, it responded better, or it could be another, Drake May shellacking, and who knows, but it's just one of those things that it's hard to really take anything away. When especially during the preseason game, you're not getting anything. Like, it's very vanilla. It's, basic offense, basic defense. Neither coach is showing their cards. So it really is hard to truly evaluate any of this stuff. But you see the clips. It's fun for content. But I am excited for what we have. And it was good to see, the former Eagles get their stuff. AJ had some things to say. He's like, the Eagles are in my past. He's like, he kept getting asked about his time in Philadelphia, and he kept wanting to, he's like, oh, put it in the past. We don't need to ask about it. Otherwise, I know what you guys are trying to do. You got, the Philly reporters are ruthless. Like, I get it. So it was funny. Like, he had that kind of, and then they turned around and asked Jalen. They asked Jalen a question, and tell me whether you think this is a weird question or not. They were like, do you have any advice to give to Drake May about getting AJ Brown the ball? And I was like, I'm like, why would Jalen? And he was quick. It took him a second, right? It took him a second. But he was quick with it. He's like, Drake May, Drake has accomplished a lot, during this stretch of, the beginning of his career. And he's like, I don't think any of my advice is going to do him any good. Kind of like the reverse of like the CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams moment that we saw a couple years ago, where CJ was like trying to coach him and Caleb's like, this dude. And so it's like Jalen avoided that kind of thing. But it's just interesting that the reporters tried to force this little drama between the two, and they actually didn't speak. AJ hung around Eagles players. A lot of the guys said hi, went up to him, but it was reported that AJ and Jalen did not cross paths. And same with Smitty and AJ, they did not talk either. So I thought that was interesting. But it didn't seem like it wasn't a negative practice. There was one fight at the very end, but it wasn't like a fight. It was a quick little scrum with the bench guys. So, interesting, intense practice, and it was just good to see kind of all this, all the noise. I love that people are doubting the Eagles and are sleeping on the Eagles off of this training camp practice. It'll be great when we bounce back during the season.
I saw a video of Dontavian Wicks just freaking burning. I don't remember who was on him.
Off the line of scrimmage, bro.
Dude, it was nasty. I mean, get bro a map. He cooked him. Dontavian looked nice with it. But I wanted to get your opinion on something, because the wide receiver thing, not having Smitty, not having Mekhi out there, it's concerning. And I want to get your level of concern, because we're now technically 2 weeks into the preseason. What is your level of concern with them not getting the reps here against, some of these other teams with the joint practices and whatnot?
So 1 being like not concerned at all, that'll be just fine, versus
Correct.
10 is like I'm freaking panicking, it's over, like just chalk it, like
Chalk
don't
it.
play these guys. I think for Smitty, I'm at like a 4. Like I get it, it is a new system, but like Smitty's been trending in the right direction. He's a vet. Him and Jalen have connected for years. That I'm not worried about. Mekhi, I'm at like a 6. I'm worried because we haven't seen him, and you run into the situation where, this feels a little a weird comparison. I don't believe they're the same talent wise, but this feels a little Devin Carter-ish to me from a Kings perspective. Is like you draft this guy, there's a lot of hype behind him, but then you get the injury concern and you're like, oh, so he really wasn't as healthy as he could have been, or we could have potentially taken a player that was healthier.
True.
And in the spot. And you see, the De'Zhaun Stribling pops off, and you see other receivers, you're hearing all these good things about them in camp, about these rookies, and I'm not able to see my guy. So it's like injuries is something that in the 2020s, I'm not that familiar with. The Super Bowl runs, the Eagles are averaging 20 of 22 starters on those rosters when they go. Like, the injuries to the star players is not something that I'm really accustomed to, so it worries me because I see what it does to other teams when they're like, oh, this guy's he's tight, he'll come back in a couple weeks, and then a couple weeks pass by, oh, he might need a couple more weeks, and next thing you know, it's half the season. So, the Eagles tried to deflect how he tried to deflect and make it seem like, oh, Cooper DeJean really came into form week 5 after we slowly brought him along. And I'm like, and I mentioned this last week, I was like, that's fine if you want to do that comparison, but like you're setting this expectation now, like, okay, is Mekhi gonna, we still haven't gotten a date. And not even just those two, Jonathan Grenard, our big free agent signing on the defensive edge. It's been reported that Vic Fangio came out and said he's worried that he's not going to be there week 1. He doesn't know for sure. And this is a guy you just paid $100 million to. So it's like while the defensive line dominated, you want that Super Bowl caliber D line, and you need Jonathan Grenard to make that happen. So the injuries are concerning, and it definitely is something that I'm worried about. I think my panic level overall is at like a 5. It's creeping up. But I know that in the coming weeks here, like we should be getting more Devontae. We have been getting slightly more Devontae. We have been getting more Mekhi. It'll just be a matter of like when it is time to incorporate both of these guys, how are they going to do it? And how does the offense look? Then where do those reps go? What is really the 1, 2, 3? Are they going to use more Dontavian? Like that'll be the next question. And then you wonder how Jalen Hurts responds to those reps. So those are going to be the things that I'm interested in, and then it boils down to that we really do need the run game to respond this year to kind of mitigate some of the pressure, take some of that pressure off the offense while they get this thing figured out.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing you got Saquon Barkley on your side for that reason, right?
Exactly.
Heck yeah. So any final thoughts then on the Eagles side? No,
I think that, they'll have another game over the weekend on Saturday, and just be a good test. Stay healthy, get healthy. It'll be hopefully Sean Mannion's going to call this game from the booth. He said that he wanted to do both during his time because he had spent so much time. He's been on the sideline mainly, but he spent a year in Green Bay in the booth, and it kind of opened his perspective. Mm-hmm. So he wants to try both, and he feels comfortable on the sideline, so he just wants to do both before he makes a final decision on what he wants to do, even though I think he's going to be on the sideline because he's the former quarterback, familiar, that kind of thing. So and I think that caters to Jalen too. I think Jalen's the guy who likes to communicate and try to figure out solutions after they happen, in the sense of like, what can I do here? And he likes communicating. So I think we'll see Sean Manning on the sideline, but it'll be cool to see how it looks for him when he calls plays up there. So that's my final thought on the Eagles. So, all right, so we will pivot on here to our predictions for the NFC North and the NFC South. We have entered the final stretch here. We got 2 more weeks of this before we make our playoff picks here. But we're going to go through the NFC. We're going to start in the NFC South. And how we've been doing it, Ben and I have been rattling off we're taking a look at last year. We're taking a look at the changes. We're going to make our predictions for who we think is going to win the division. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to make our playoff picks prior to the season starting, our 7 teams that advance and where we go from there. So when we look at the NFC South last year, what a freaking shit show this was. I mean, 3 8-9 teams, the Panthers, Buccaneers, and Falcons, and the Saints finishing at 6-11. And so the Panthers ultimately make the playoffs. That was a crazy fever dream, and they had a decent moment there trying to contest with the Rams briefly. But when we look at what the odds are this year, we find that this might be our first worst to first bet that DraftKings would pull. And I pulled again, just like I did last week. I pulled the odds as of today. So as of Wednesday, August 19th. So that's what the stats, the updated projections are on DraftKings. So it's the Saints on plus 194, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at plus 223 at second, the Carolina Panthers at plus 335, and the Atlanta Falcons at plus 400. I found this to be very intriguing when it comes down to the picks. So you and I are going to go for it, and I'm really excited to see what you have, and I'm going to let you kick it off for the NFC South. What are your records?
So my division winner is the New Orleans Saints at 9-8.
Love it.
Then I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 8-9.
Okay.
The Panthers at 7-10. And the Falcons at 5-12.
Interesting. Okay, I think I know. I have an idea of like why your argument is what it is, but okay, so we'll talk about it. So I also had the Saints at first. I have them at 10-7. I believe in them a little bit more. 9-8, 10-7. That's all it takes to win the NFC South is 10 wins. So then I also picked Tampa Bay Buccaneers to go second at 8-9. I picked Atlanta to go third at 8-9 as well, same as last year. And then I also had the Panthers at 7-10. So I think the Panthers is a good place to start. I know you had Atlanta lower, and I want to get to that in a second, but I think you and I had the Panthers at a similar spot at 7-10. And when we look at what they have in the offseason, I'm going to pull this up here real quick. They did have some cool moves. Obviously, they've got Jalen Phillips from Philadelphia. You add Devin Lloyd. You draft Monroe Freeling and Lee Hunter, but you lose Rico Dowdle. But like not too many moves for this team. Although they are dealing with some sucky injuries. Their second-year guy, Nick Scourton, tore his ACL on the first day of practice. So he's, not on the field, and he was projected, you wanted to see him alongside Jalen Phillips. Like, that was kind of the whole point. And then their third-round pick, I believe, Chris Brazzell, the receiver from Tennessee, also suffered an injury that he's going to be missing major time. So they don't get a chance to see that young guy paired up. But you look at this team, it felt like they overachieved a little bit on defense, although they just added major pieces, right? Like Phillips and Lloyd are two, arguably top 10 players at their position, and they played that way last year. So that's not nothing. I like the coach. I like Dave Canales. I like what he can do. Bryce can win you games. He's shown some moxie in some big spots. Last year, the Panthers won some incredible games last year by the skin of their teeth. But they always felt like they were kind of punching above their weight. And I don't know, with Bryce, what the ceiling truly is, but he is a former number one overall pick. And I think is going to be one of, if not the last year for him to really solidify himself as the potential future of this team.
So I based a lot of this off of the recency bias that I saw from the Panthers prior to the playoffs. And look, I mean, the way that the playoff structure is the only reason why the Panthers made the playoffs last year. The Panthers, in my opinion, they're headed for a pretty significant regression. I mean, in 2025, they lost 3 of their last 4 regular season games before, clinching the playoffs with an 8-9 record. It's a losing record. This division in and of itself is weak. But the Panthers, they're going to have a shot, I think, but the biggest thing for me, you mentioned Bryce Young. You mentioned that he can win you games. They're hesitant to give him a contract, and
as they should be.
There's a reason for that. I think the reason is he barely eclipsed 3,000 passing yards last season, and then between weeks 8 and 11 against Green Bay. That was on short rest, so that one's kind of game, it was a crazy game. Denver, the Saints, and then the Ravens. They kind of fell apart last year, and they looked decent to the start of the year, and then it just was a big slugfest in a way. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of recency bias. Yes, I think that they have pieces, especially with those additions, like you said. But it's a matter of making those pieces work together. And as far as their strength of schedule, I'm pulling it up right now. It's not it's not easy. I mean, they have the 30th easiest schedule, meaning they are one of the tougher schedules in the NFL.
Yeah, and it begs the question too, because we'll talk about another team in here that has a really easy schedule. So they play the same divisions, but the Panthers have all the first place teams, and that's what happens when you finish first in a really shitty division. You're gonna have to play all the really good teams, and that it will make things a little bit more difficult for the Panthers. So it'll be interesting to see if they can bounce. If they can pick up and go back to back, but it would be hard for me to see that happening this year. Although I like what they have, I don't know. I don't know how much I believe in Bryce. I feel bad saying that because you want to believe in the guy, but he feels like a right-handed Tua without the results. So it's just that's the part where because Tua, you had the argument of he's fragile and he's a concussion away from being a vegetable, but at the same time he could still sling it for 5,000 yards. So with Bryce, you don't get that. So that's the part that it's how are you really gonna sell yourself if you're the Panthers on committing 150 million to this guy?
For sure, but it's also in my opinion, I don't think Bryce Young is that good, and right. I can look at this and say that simply because we have Mr. Irrelevant, and if we had if Bryce Young was Mr. Irrelevant instead of the number 1 overall pick, we wouldn't even be batting an eye at this guy. We'd be like, yeah, he's trash, but we continue to keep throwing that he's, he potentially has a ceiling. We just don't know what it is. We're waiting to see what that ceiling is, and we see a 3-game stretch where he's a freaking baller, and then we see a 5-game stretch where he is the worst quarterback in his division and the worst quarterback in his, conference. So it's tough to have a lot of faith in this team, in my opinion. That's kind of where I'm stuck right now on them.
Oh, that's fair. All right, so let's pivot on to the Falcons. I think this is a very interesting discussion, and it obviously starts with the quarterback discussion. And obviously they decided to bring in Tua Tagovailoa, another left-handed liability at quarterback, alongside Michael Penix, who is recovering from his 3rd ACL tear. Call him Nick Bosa. Their quarterback room is dire. And for the first 2 weeks of practice, they didn't have a starting quarterback to freaking throw to their weapons. You look at the roster, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, you should be in a good offensive line. You should be able to, amass a really efficient offense. And with Kirk Cousins, they had some, at least enough juice. And you really wonder, and the reason they went to Kirk Cousins in the first place was because Michael Penix played like shit. So you really wonder, I had them at 8 and 9. I debated putting them lower, but they have so much talent that they re-signed and extended, and so they're keeping the core here. All that comes down to, now that they're off of Raheem Morris, they're on Kevin Stefanski now. He'll be calling plays, so it'll just be interesting to see, because they lost a lot of folks. You got Kirk Cousins leaving, Tyler Algier leaving, Caleb McGarry retired. He was a long-time offensive lineman. Arnold Ebiketie went to the Eagles, and Caden Ellis was big for them last year. But I don't know, man. Their draft pick, I didn't have it on here. I accidentally forgot. But it's Avion Terrell. So the brothers playing together is very cool. But Atlanta, for me, especially with their 2 defensive ends, both out for different reasons. They're 2 second-year players. James Pierce Jr., legal issues, crazy story. Go ahead and look it up. It's crazy. Jalen Walker tore his ACL. That sucks. He's out for the year. So it's those 2 guys that you were planning your future around will not be here. So it makes things a lot harder. I know Darius Smith came out of retirement and decided to sign up for the Atlanta Falcons. So they're going to have their defense is going to be questionable to me. And I don't know how, I think with a non-defensive coordinate, with Raheem Morris leaving, I think the defense is going to fall off a little bit. But yeah, I don't know about Atlanta, man. I think if their quarterback situation is what it is, it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, you laid out the reason why I have zero faith in this team, and it is solely because of that edge position. James Pierce Jr., it is a crazy story, but we can also call it what it is. He's being charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. So that's one hand, and then like you said, Jalen Walker tearing his ACL, it sucks. But they have no edge presence, And the rest of their defense doesn't, like, without that edge presence, the rest of their defense is mid at best, mid. So they're going to put up points because of the weapons that they have offensively. The Tua thing, the Michael Penix thing is random as hell. It's going to be funny to watch how that whole thing shakes down this year, but they're going to be a train wreck of a team, in my opinion. I don't think that this season is going to be anything worth noting for Atlanta. I think that eventually you're going to see Bijan just want out of there, to be honest with you, because it just feels like another season of incompetence where they just continue to, like, not really know the direction that they want to go, you know? So that's kind of where I'm stuck at.
Honestly, the best thing for them, because they have all these guys signed, it might be to just go 5-12. Like,
Maybe.
Go get one of the, get one of these quarterbacks, and then you'll be, feeling like in a better spot because you have the team around them. Like that, this is a quarterback friendly situation. So I understand the thought process behind a Tua, and even behind like just letting Michael Penix ride this one out. But like, man, like you're wasting prime years of all-star skill position players that you just don't. It's hard. You got to maximize a window like this, and they have all the bones. They just don't have the brain of the operations at quarterback. So that's where I can't really, think anything else about this team that they're just going to be a mediocre run-of-the-mill team.
Yeah, exactly.
So we move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who we feel similarly. I think over the past couple of years they've taken a step back. I mean, when we look at the changes this year, you lose Mike Evans, Devontae David retires, Sterling Shepard was a good weapon. You lose Jamel Dean. Like you're losing a lot of the bones of that offense, a lot of the bones of that defense, and Mike Evans, obviously the key component of this franchise for a decade and a half. So it's like, then you have Zach Robinson calling plays for them now. That's an interesting, decision. And Baker's in this last year of the contract, in a contract struggle with the Buccaneers, and it doesn't feel like there's going to be a contract for him when now Baker is going to be talked about as that next quarterback who, he might go somewhere like the Vikings or back to Cleveland or something like that, an opportunity next year. So this feels kind of like the kind of last hurrah for Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. And it doesn't really inspire that much confidence in me. And it's not like they did, when you look at who they added, like, Reuben Bain, I think is going to be awesome. Josiah Trotter, I have a lot of, faith in. Ted Hurst sounds like a cool young receiver. And you got Emeka Buka, but he's been, still dealing with some injuries. I don't know how I feel about this team. It feels just like Baker will help them win some games, but then they'll also, get blown out, and like Todd Bowles is on it, like none of this feels inspiring anymore. They kind of feel like this is one of these middle of the road teams that needs like a kind of a hard reset.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, losing the leadership on both sides of the ball between Levante David and Mike Evans, like that's definitely not nothing. Those were two, cornerstone guys for that organization. So that's going to be an adjustment, but Baker's on basically a contract year. I mean, he's going to be playing his freaking mind out. It's just a matter of whether, he can actually win those shootouts, because it's going to come down to those shootouts. Under Todd Bowles, this Buccaneers defense is ranked 16th or worst in total yards and scoring in back-to-back seasons. So
yeah, this
to me just doesn't feel like a recipe for success. Like, you think of this Buccaneers season 2-3 years ago, and this is a shell of what that team used to be. It is hard to look at this Buccaneers team right now and say that they are going to be anything close to the competitive team that they were even just a year ago. Like a year ago, last year was a mess with the 8-9 record and multiple bad games and whatnot, and a total collapse, but like, they were competitive. They still found ways to be competitive throughout the season. And Baker always finds a way to put points and be a dog out there. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks, but it's like, this is a shell of that team. This is a shell of just the team that they had last year. It just doesn't feel real. I think they're below 500 this year.
Yeah, I think their run, they had the Brady run in 2020 where they win the whole thing, and then and then it kind of just Baker kind of kept that afloat after Brady, and now it just kind of feels like the ship is sinking, for lack of a better term, for the Buccaneers. But either way, so it'll be interesting to see how the Bucs, what they do this year. And again, it's this division. It's always ugly. I don't think they're going to do that much. So 8-9. And then when we talk about our division winner, the New Orleans Saints, who we both have this year. I think they're everyone's trendy pick for this division in particular because you saw the way they finished last year. You saw the way Tyler Shuck played. You saw Kellen Moore starting to get a little bit more creative. Kellen Moore showing some chops a little bit in his first year as a head coach. And you look at what, this offseason for them, they lost a couple, big name veterans that they used to have, right, from their previous regime, Taysom Hill, Demario Davis. But they still kept Cameron Jordan. They extended Chris Olave recently, gave him a huge contract. They re-signed Julian Blackmon. They added Travis Etienne, Noah Fant, and Caden Ellis. So it's like you feel good about like the veteran additions they made to kind of mitigate some of the losses they had. They drafted Jordan Tyson, although it's been reported, he had a hamstring injury. He's going to be out for a couple months, and that's, a big blow because he was having a good training camp. And you wonder, this year, the Saints have what's the important thing for the Saints is that they have I believe the third easiest schedule in the NFL this year. And it'll benefit them because they get the fourth place teams. It's going to be an easier road for them to, kind of get through this division. Because I think the division, it's a slugfest. They're all going to split with each other. It's not like anyone's going to really separate themselves. That's how it works. So I think that's where the advantage kind of comes to New Orleans. And they proved that Tyler, there's a proof of concept with Tyler Shuck. And Tyler Shuck, he's an older guy. So they really do have to make this window with him work now. But I think they set themselves up in a really good spot to kind of build. They feel like a team that could actually build off of what they did last year versus all these other teams in the division.
Yeah, this to me feels like they're finally like actually building towards something because a couple of years ago I came on the pod and we did this whole prediction thing, and I've been saying that they've been kicking this can of rebuild down the road for a few years now. Basically since Drew Brees walked out. And retired. So like it feels like now they finally have they had committed to that rebuild last year in a way, and this year looking at the pieces that they committed to and like you said, those veteran additions that they have, like it feels like they have a little more competency inside of their organization, and that to me I think is going to kind of speak volumes. And signing a guy like Travis Etienne, he's automatically going to help that offense out, and if you think that Kellen Moore he's putting himself in the conversation among the league's ascending play calling head coaches right now. So it just feels like from a timing standpoint, based on the guys that they signed, the coaching staff that they have, like everything seems to be kind of meshing together, and they're going to be taking advantage right now of a division that is kind of in shambles around them. So yeah. I think this is the time to for New Orleans to kind of put something together and have a winning season.
Yeah, because in the NFC South, it's one of those things where if you have a good enough season, you'll get into the dance, and that's what some of these teams really just want. I mean, all these fan bases deserve a playoff run. It's just hard when the teams just find ways to shoot themselves in the foot the entire season. So, I think New Orleans has the best chance to avoid doing that this year.
Agreed.
So that will be it for the NFC South. So give us a break here. We need to take a quick break because out of respect for Jaden Daniels, we can only talk about 4 teams at a time. We can't do 5, so we got to take a quick 4-minute break before we come back and talk about the NFC North. All right, we are back on the Behind the Back podcast. Obviously, for those who didn't get the joke, Jaden Daniels was the talk of the town this week, so I thought it was important to get him involved. Nobody can use the number 5 for anything, and if you guys are confused about that, go look it up. It's hilarious, objectively hilarious that the entire world kind of ran off with this meme for Jaden Daniels. Yeah,
but just know if you Google it and you type the number 5 out there, you're disrespecting the hell out of Jaden Daniels. So if just recognize that that's happening.
Yeah, and the Eagles were disrespected them right away. I mean, they dropped 55 on them, 2 years ago. It's the ultimate disrespect, bro.
You guys kicked it off.
So, okay. So back to the topic at hand. So we're back to make our NFC North predictions now. We talk about a very interesting division, the NFC North. They were an interesting division last year. When we look at the records here, it's kind of the reverse of the NFC South, where 11-6, 9-7-1 for the Packers. So 11-6 for the Bears. 9-7-1 for the Packers, Vikings and Lions both at 9-8. And this year, when we look at the odds, I want to pull this up because this is I found to be interesting too. Both the NFC North and South kind of did the same thing. The worst to first kind of jump prediction in the DraftKings odds. So they have the Lions favored at, plus 170, Green Bay Packers at plus 245, Chicago Bears at plus 335, and the Minnesota Vikings at plus 400. This is really close. Like they think this division is going to be closer than people think. And I'm really curious to see who you have in what spots. So give me your 4 and let's get this discussion kicked off.
All right. So my division winner is the Detroit Lions at 11-6.
Okay.
Then I've got the Bears at 10-7. Then I got the Packers at 9-8. And then the Vikings also at 9-8, but the Packers winning that tiebreaker. And that one, to me, could go either way. I just picked it that way.
Wow. Okay. See, so we're aligned in that sense where I too had the Lions. I had them going 12-5. I had the Bears at second at 11-6. I think they're both going to make the playoffs. I think this is going to be a tough one because I had wrestled with this pick. I think the Vikings are going to be third, but I also have them. I have them at 10-7, and I think the Packers are going to be 8-9 this year.
We're pretty aligned.
Yeah, I was surprised. I didn't think, actually it feels easier when we talk about this. It'll feel easier. So let's talk about the Packers because I think the main thing. This is a team that's going through a lot of change. The most fun change about this is that, our favorite defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, was now manning that defense. Micah Parsons won't be playing until optimistically week 6. It does worry me a bit when they, you lose Rashawn Gary, you lose Quay Walker, you lose Romeo Downs, Dontavian Wicks. Like, you lost, like, key parts of that team that, contributors who, again, this wasn't like a world-breaking team, the Packers. I think the Packers these past few years have shown flashes, and then they kind of tumble, or an injury happens, or something always happens with LaFleur and this freaking team, where they never seem to meet the expectations that are set for them, but they're everyone's favorite team. They're like, Jordan Love's the next freaking greatest quarterback out there. Like, Jordan Love can win them games. Like, it'll be great. And they just never seem to step up. And I think the Packers, they have talent, and I think that once Micah comes back, this defense is going to look great. Like, Micah does that, right? But how healthy is he going to be? Can he stay healthy the rest of the year? And, that's why I could see them starting off poor, to start the season. And, they'll finish strong, especially when the winter months come and they get to play teams at home, like things like that. But, like, I don't know, man. I used to talk myself into this team, and I can't talk myself into them anymore. I'm kind of over it. So now I have to be, proven wrong. 8-9 is kind of where I feel about Green Bay.
I've never been able to talk myself into Green Bay just because I've watched the Niners wipe the floor with them every single year. But, the Packers to me, so like you said, the biggest news in this whole season for them right now is Micah Parsons. With him not necessarily coming back until at least week 6, because that's what it sounds like. Right. They have to start off hot. And if they don't start off hot, and mind you, it's a tough schedule that they have this year. Between those weeks that Micah could potentially come back, that is between, weeks 5 and 7, they see the Bears, the Cowboys, and the Lions. Those are 3 teams that can put points on the board in a hurry. And if you think that Parsons is going to come back and be in tip-top shape, playing every single down that, means something, I think you need to second-guess that. So yeah. This doesn't feel like a promising year for Green Bay. I think that right now there are a lot of cards stacked against them. The hand has not been dealt well for them. This doesn't feel like a year where Green Bay can look at this and go, we've got a real chance at contending. It doesn't even feel like they've got a real chance at necessarily making the playoffs. Like a rocky start to this year, we will know what this team's going to look like 5 weeks in. I shit you not. Yeah. 5 weeks into the season, if this team has a winning record, even of 3-2, this team will be good. They'll be good enough to potentially push for a playoffs. But if they are a losing record, 2-3, 1-4, 0-5, chalk this team up as missing the playoffs and not doing anything this year.
Yeah, and it's hard with this team because they're trying to shed some of the contracts and trying to work into this kind of youth movement and try to rebuild around Jordan Love. But man, yeah, I don't know. Nothing really excites me about this team anymore. Nothing, it's hard to be sold on the Green Bay Packers. And
one last thing too is like their cornerback room is sus. And and what did I just talk about with the Niners? Like if you don't have pressure on your D-line, your secondary has that much more pressure to perform, and that secondary is not going to perform. So it's just another layer to this whole thing.
Yeah, and that D-line doesn't have the juice without Micah. So yeah, it's setting up for, the offense needs to put up points every week, and that's going to be hard. So it's like Green Bay, man, I don't know. I don't feel good about Green Bay. So let's talk about Minnesota, because I think this is an interesting team. I think this is a trendy pick for, people to pick them to make the playoffs. You add Kyler Murray to this. You add Jawan Jennings. That's cool. Welcome to the fam. You make a cool trio here with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, but they lost some big pieces. Like you lose Jonathan Grenard to the Eagles, you lose Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, and you can say what you want about him at this stage of his career. Harrison Smith was a huge part of this team for many years, and you lose him. Jalen Naylor was a cool young piece, but I mean, you have Jawan Jennings, so like you can say you traded off. You kept Carson Wentz and you extended Eric Wilson. When they were 9-8 last year, and they do not have the vibe of a 9-8 team, with JJ McCarthy's injury and terrible play, with Carson Wentz's injury and terrible play. And when they were down to that third string quarterback who whoever his name was, who couldn't do anything, it was, to have all that happen and for them to go through what they went through and to still somehow be 9-8. It's hard not to say, hey, you add Kyler Murray to this, a quarterback who can get Justin Jefferson the freaking ball, and talk yourself into thinking, okay, the defense, Brian Flores, he always has them at a certain floor. Like they'll be a competitive top 10 defense, so can Kyler just do enough? Can he give us average quarterback play, which his entire career suggests that's exactly what he's going to do, is give you average quarterback play. And will that be enough to propel this Vikings team to the playoffs? And I think this year it will, but some things have to go their way. And they do get the benefit of that third place schedule. So, it's not like it's not a super daunting schedule, but I do think that Minnesota, it's going to ride on Kyler Murray and how successful he is. But, that's a big question mark. And there's a sneaky part of it, a sneaky conversation we can have here too about someone else. But I want to get your take on what you've seen so far with Minnesota, why you have them where you do.
I think with Minnesota, for me, I mean, Kyler Murray, it really does ride on if he can stay healthy. And I'm taking kind of a shot in the dark and saying that he'll be relatively healthy this year. But you got to keep in mind, like, his history since 2021, he's only played one full season. Like, we could potentially see J.J. McCarthy start a few games this year, and we know what that looks like. It doesn't look good. So that'll be a loss. You can chalk up any game that JJ starts as a loss. It really does boil down to their health. But if Kyler's out there, he can wheel and deal. And I mean, when he wheels, he gets out of the pocket, because that's the only way you can see over the offensive line is when he doesn't have one in front of him. And then you've got targets. Justin Jefferson is the best. I think he's the best receiver in football right now. It just needs a damn quarterback. Anytime. You just need a damn quarterback. And then Jordan Addison is a great target. Jawan Jennings feels like he's Kevin Durant on the Warriors right now. So, he's got a cast of receivers to throw to. And, as far as the defense is concerned, Brian Flores, he molded that Vikings defense into a top 10 unit in scoring in, I think it was total yards. So, they've got potential. It's just a matter of like making it all kind of mesh, and that's my concern. Is can your main guys stay healthy? Because even Justin Jefferson has struggled with injuries lately. Can he stay healthy? Can Kyler stay healthy? Can the defense stay healthy? And can you guys find ways to win? As far as their strength of schedule is concerned, I'm pulling it up right now. They're middle of the pack. They're 15th. So they're going to have favorable games. They're going to have really tough games. So we'll see what this unit looks like. I don't have a ton of faith in them, but I don't think they're going to be the worst in football either.
Well, I mean, we got to think about it this way, right? Like Minnesota, they're such an interesting team, especially under Kevin O'Connell. He's kind of making a name for himself by
He's
resurrecting the
awesome.
careers of middling quarterbacks. Like we got Kirk Cousins, you have Sam Darnold. So this is like recent. But then that bears the question: is Sam Darnold won 14 games with Minnesota and Kevin O'Connell, but then won the Super Bowl with Seattle and Clint Kubiak, right? So then now and then all of a sudden, Kirk Cousins, he's had different stops after Minnesota. It didn't look as good because he's just old at this stage. But like, what happens if the conversation would be okay? So he'll obviously boost Kyler, right? He'll obviously make Kyler a lot better. I wonder how much longer the KOC dynamic. How much leeway does he really get versus a guy like does he get the Shanahan McVay level of respect because he wins a lot? Like his teams win a lot, but part of that could be attributed to Brian Flores. Ever since they got Brian Flores, he's one of the few coaches that's allowed him to coexist with him. So it's been,
Good point.
I don't know. I'm not saying KOC's a fraud. I like him as a coach, but it is interesting. Like he hasn't had his guy yet either. Like he hasn't had his quarterback, and it begs the question. Like I wonder if things go well with Kyler, do they pay him or do they? That's it. This is a weird dance that the Vikings are in, but they're a good enough team to compete. I like them, but there's some questions around them that like internally that I have, because like how they treated JJ was really weird, and their whole thing with the GM that got let go, that was weird, and they kind of tried to brush that under the rug and kind of wipe KOC from like any of it, of like the blame. So yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, I agreed.
When we have two more teams to go, we got the Bears and the Lions. So when we talk about the Bears are interesting because they have all the hype around them. Caleb Williams, they had incredible postseason success. They had the walk off against the Packers and the crazy game against the Rams where it went down to the wire. But they lost a lot of folks. They lost a lot of pieces. You lose DJ Moore, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Brisker, Tremaine Edmonds. You add Devin Bush, and you added Kobe Bryant, but now he's hurt long term. He got hurt at practice. That sucks. You drafted Dylan Thieneman. I like that pick for the safety. You bring in Garrett Bradbury from New England. But the hope is that another year, Caleb Williams, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, Ben Johnson, like, can the O-line continue to improve and keep Caleb up? Will Caleb take another step? Will he get more efficient? He's not the most efficient quarterback. He hits on big plays, but can he be more efficient this year? Will they have the same level of success in the run game with DeAndre Swift? Monangai got hurt, so like, what's their running back situation look like in the regular season? They get the tougher schedule. They get the first place schedule, and they're going to be. The expectations are so high on this team right now because there's all these young, from the coach to the players, young talent all over the place. So I have faith, but I have them at 11-6 because like they could stay exactly the same but still look and feel better. And I think that this will be a team that will compete this year for a playoff spot for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Kobe Bryant, he just underwent that knee surgery and he'll miss like 4 to 6 months. The defense to me is the biggest question mark. Like last year finished 23rd in points allowed. They gave up the 4th most yards, and granted they still found a way to win the division, but it really does boil down to Ben Johnson led offenses and what him, Caleb, and these weapons can do. You can chalk it up that they're going to be top 10 in scoring. It's just a matter of like, can they get the timely stops? And that to me is where, last year you didn't see them get the timely stops. I mean, think back to the week against the 49ers is a great example considering our podcast. All they needed to do was get a couple stops on Brock. And I mean, at one point they had Brock beat, and that was the season highlight was him scrambling and making that play to juice in the end zone. That should never happen. That was zero athleticism from their defensive line. Those guys were gassed. And that's the kind of thing that has been missing from that defense is they don't have the athletic front line. They don't have this crazy defensive line that is going to generate this, the pressure required for this team to actually do anything defensively. So I'm concerned about what they're going to be defensively. Offensively, what they're going to be. It's just a matter of can they win those shootouts.
Yeah, they're a Max Crosby candidate too. They could They could definitely use someone like him. So, yeah, no, I agree that like the defense. Ben Johnson was on record saying he wants to have like the greatest scoring offense of all time this year. Like he thinks that they're capable of.
He needs it.
Doing that kind of thing, and I agree. They need that, I think, to win. I think that they will win, but it will be interesting to see, what how much of the talking points on their defense this year. So then, when we pivot on to the Detroit Lions, I think the obvious argument, for Detroit when we talk about them again, they were worst in the division, 9-8. Terrible injuries. Their whole roster was decimated. They underperformed. Dan Campbell had to, was calling plays midway through the season. And they lost a lot of like key guys that were a part of this core that they, tried to have. Like David Montgomery's gone. Dan Skipper retired. Marcus Davenport's gone. DJ Reader's gone. Taylor Decker's gone. Alex Anzalone's gone. Terry and Arnold got, kidnapped somebody. Amik Robertson. They lost a lot of guys. And, but when you look at who they added, no one that exciting. I mean, Cade Mays was their big offensive line addition, and he's hurt, and he's going to be missing some time. You have Greg Dortch, Tyler Conklin, Isaiah Pacheco, who's also hurt. Blake Miller you drafted, and Derek Moore, the defensive end, you drafted. You re-signed Jahmyr Gibbs, great. Jack Campbell, great. Both part of the same draft, good for them. But this is still a good team with the bones of their offense is going to be awesome, even if their O-line has some moving parts to it. The defense is I have no idea what to expect of this defense. It's been a disaster the past couple of years, and I kind of expect it to be that way. But they have the easiest schedule, by far in the NFL, or the second. They have a top 2 schedule. But one little nugget about their schedule that I really enjoyed, that you have to buy stock because Jared Goff is an indoor quarterback. They play inside of a dome. So week 5, they have a bye after week 5, but from week 5 to week 15, they play inside. Whether it's at home or on the road, they play in a dome. And their last 2 games against Chicago and Green Bay will be outside. But that is a nice 10-week stretch where Jared Goff doesn't have to deal with the weather or the ball slipping out of his hands. So I do think that's very important to think about when you talk about Detroit, because Jared Goff cooks indoors. So this is something to keep in mind when we talk about this team.
That is 100% the reason why I have bought stocks on Detroit this year. Defensively, I don't really care what they need to be, because offensively they're going to do what they need to do to win games this year. That you just look at what they've got offensively, and you already highlighted it. It's just there's so many weapons, and with Jared Goff not having to worry about the ball slipping out of his hand and just going through the motions from week 5 to 16, dude, what the hell? The NFL just gifted them this blessing of a stretch where they get to just dominate, potentially. So, I think buying stock in Detroit this year is the right call, because, the other factor, too, it's an underrated factor that I don't think a lot of people consider, was Drew Petzing. He was the Arizona Cardinals play caller in 2024. That's the same play caller who made the Cardinals the 12th ranked scoring offense in 2024. So they're gonna find so many ways to put points on the board this year. They're gonna win shootouts, and you're not gonna have a lot of doubt that they're gonna win any of these shootouts.
Yeah, absolutely. And and to pivot back real quick, something to consider, especially for those who, want to buy some Chicago Bears stock. When we look at the rest disadvantage and advantage, Chicago has the best rest advantage in the league at plus 15. So the schedule makers, while they have a tougher schedule, they're giving the Bears a big advantage in a lot of these games by their rest. Detroit is much more even, but they get the easier schedule, right? So that's kind of the trade-off.
They get the easiest schedule.
Easiest. So they have the easiest schedule. So we kind of saw what happened. It might not be the easiest schedule in 25 years easy, but that does mean something. Sure. And you see the league try to do these little things to try to set up certain teams that they maybe want to see down the road. And it's because of, guys being healthy because they're more rested and things like that. So definitely something to look out for. But yeah, Detroit, man, I think that their offense is just going to be fine. I agree. Drew Petzing was an underrated pickup because their offensive coordinator, their offensive situation last year, they were still a top 5 offense, and they had to switch. Dan Campbell and I forget who was calling plays last year. They had to switch up. So it's like all that was happening, and you're still managing a top 5 offense. It just shows like a competent play caller. We saw what Ben Johnson can do. Detroit's going to be just fine. But that's an interesting part about some of these NFC teams this year. It feels like it's like all offense, no defense, and this year is just going to be a lot of shootouts, and I think this year is going to be really entertaining.
This is how the NFL wants it to be, so they're playing right into the hands of them.
Honestly, so we have made our predictions for the NFC North and South. We're more in lockstep than I anticipated. I thought this was going to be. This has been the case the whole freaking time. This is weird. This year we're seeing things eye to eye. There's no, we feel
crazy
pretty lockstep.
Discrepancies. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me worried. I don't know how this is going to turn out then, but no, I feel good about our picks. How are you feeling? You feeling good?
Yeah, I really feel like there's only a handful of teams that are super unknown as to, toss-ups and it based on, injuries and this, that, or the other thing. Like, there's a good amount of teams here that you have a feeling like they're going to be really good or really bad based on schedule, based on departures, arrivals, so on. Like, the scope of the NFL right now is, I feel like I've got a good grasp on it because I've been kind of locked into it all off season long, and I know you have too. So that's why, in and of itself, I think it's interesting to see us aligned. I feel pretty damn confident in a lot of our predictions, dude.
Yeah, same. So, yeah, interesting look. Next week, we got the NFC East and the NFC West, our 2 divisions that tend to set up a very interesting conversation for a lot of these teams that we know very personally and very dearly. A lot of animosity towards. This is going to be it. We're going to get into the good stuff next week, guys. So we appreciate you guys sticking around for this prediction series so far. We hope you'd enjoyed it. But this has been episode 136 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all y'all watching on YouTube, we got everything that you need to hit us up right here. Please go ahead and follow each and every single one of these, like, subscribe. For all y'all audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a rate, review, follow, give us anything we can, any love and support, comments. We appreciate it. All you guys supporting us each and every week as we inch closer and closer to the NFL season, inch closer and closer to the NBA season. Things are about to get real here, guys. It's time. It's time for the, I don't even know how to describe it. But all I know is that the offseason's ending and we get the real deal pressure-packed games, and our mental health will be questioned in the coming months. So
that's a great way to put it, brother.
Right. With that being said, my name's Marcos Conan. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.